Well, we're excited about the start of the legislative session. We, of course, got the momentous immigration legislation passed prior to this session, which I thought was a big priority for not only the state of Florida, but for the country. We're rocking and rolling on that. I mean, we've got all the state agencies are locked on the 287G agreements, which I could have done even in the absence of the legislation, but all 67 sheriff's departments, and now Larry Keefe is working on all the police departments. I was talking to Wayne Ivey. He's got all the police departments in Brevard that are on board, and I know some other sheriffs are working for things of that nature. So that's a really big deal, and we've led by example. You saw Virginia governor ordered the state to participate. I think you're going to see more and more of that as these weeks and months go on. So that was a huge priority. We're glad that we were able to get that done, and we've been off to the races, and we've gone so much faster than any other state. I did mention some other issues that we hopefully will be able to address, the petition reform, the condos issues. Those are two things that pretty much everyone agrees needs to see some action. I've been hands off on the condo. We solicited a lot of information over the last many months. We've provided a number of different feedback items. I know the Senate has done some stuff, but the reality is this is going to continue to be an issue until it's addressed. And I trust that they're going to do it. We obviously wanted to do it a couple months ago, but as long as it gets done, I think that'll make a big difference. And both leaders have indicated they want to do the overhaul of the petition process and how those amendments have worked and not worked very well. And I really think that that's something that's important. So I look forward to seeing that, as well as many other great things that will likely come up down the pike. Okay, any questions? Yes.
Governor, I'm curious what you think about the House Speaker's call for basically an investigation of insurers. You mentioned how the market is stabilized, but he's saying that he's worried that they may have been collecting profits and saying it was a crisis.
Well, I think I think that there was a report about 2017 to 2019. And there were parts of the insurance, the way it worked, that were not even subject to oversight. But the reforms in 22, now that's all subject to oversight. So I'm not sure whether there's examples of that since then that OIR has not done. I know that they look at the books very closely. If there's things that need to be done to be able to make sure that we have transparency and appropriate oversight, I'm all for it. What I am not going to support is opening up the litigation floodgates. The fact is our markets were being driven into the ground because of excessive litigation. We had 78% of all litigation costs nationwide with 8% of the claims. What killed me on the statistics is most of the litigation was Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. They haven't been hit by hurricanes in the last 10 years, maybe a little in Dade and Irma, but Broward and Palm Beach haven't all, and yet they have all this. Why? Because it became a cottage industry. So if you want to have situations where lawyers will get hundreds of thousands and the policyholder will get 40 or 50,000, just know you are going to destabilize the market and you are going to see things spiral. And just think about where we are. This is not easy to do, but you have major hurricanes. We had 3 significant storms, right? And 5 years ago, people would have said if that happened that the whole markets would just collapse. No one's saying that now. So far, the rates that have been filed with the Office of Insurance Regulation are 2%, 8.2, 0.8%, 1% increases. That's a sign of stability. So I think folks have entered our market, unlike California, some other states where they're fleeing the market. And what they want to know is that this business environment is going to be stable in the state of Florida. And I know I've spoken with members of the Senate. This is going to be stable in Florida. Like what has been done is going to remain. If there are things that we need to do on a regulatory front, I mean, I'm open to that. I'm also open to other ideas. I mean, for example, I know there's an idea to surge DOA judges to hurricane areas so that we can get rapid adjudication of claims. I think that sounds great to me. I'm all about doing that. But what we can't do is do litigation bonanza. That was something that needed to be done. You would not have had a reduction in auto insurance. GEICO would not be reducing by 10.5% if you didn't do the litigation reform. Car insurance is spiking nationwide. We don't have the best driving in Florida, and yet they're doing. The reduction is solely because of the litigation reform, and that's just the nature of it. But I will say what was pointed out in those comments, I think based on the report, the legislature has addressed that specific issue with oversight now. So all that is subject to oversight. And I know if there's anything that can be done, OIR has been willing to hold people accountable.
You want to put on the ballot on property taxes.
We're going to work that out. I mean, what I said in my comments was you got to get 60%. So I want to get as bold of relief for taxpayers as possible. We are going to be, the legislature is going to be studying different aspects of it. One of the things that I announced that we're looking for is give us a period of time, a year, year and a half, to be able to doge local governments. Realistically, we got to do this probably within the next 6 months to be able to shine some light on how that's. Now, I do have some authority under current statutes to get certain information about financial management. It's not probably what you would need to do a full doge. But I think what people see is these budgets have gone up dramatically, way, way in excess of the population increases. And look, some of it's inflation. I mean, we've seen that in Florida. We've had big population spike, big inflation. And even though our budget's been stable the last couple years, it's higher than it was 6 or 8 years ago, partially just because of that. But we need to show that. And then I think we're going to be at a great spot to say, okay, what can we get on the ballot? What can get past the legislature to get on the ballot? And then what can we marshal 60% of the electorate? As you know, we can't just cut property taxes through the state legislature because of the constitutional foundations of vesting that in local government. But the reality is twofold. One, you have people who are just living their lives. They bought a house 10 years ago, and now someone's telling them it's worth $1 million, and they got to pony up more money to the government. And our homestead exemption is not adequate. It is not adequate to protect taxpayers against that. So people are really getting pinched, and that's a huge, huge problem. And then you just have the overall philosophical point of, is it private property or not? Because if they can just keep taxing you when you own the home, own the land, free and clear, and they're just taxing you, then really you're paying rent to the government. And I think a lot of people think that that's wrong. So there will be something that we'll work on over these next many months, look to put it on the next legislative session, not this one. And realistically, it's going to go on 26 ballot anyways. So we're going to do that. And I know people want relief. And this is things, I don't like do polling or anything, but it's like when you just are out and about and people come up to you like at a gas station or something, oh yeah, the property taxes, we need relief. Like, people really do need this. And that's the one thing we control. We can't, all the price increases you've seen on groceries, on all these other things, the government ultimately can't, we can't set price control, say, okay, we're going to say eggs are $1 a dozen. Like, if I could do that, I would. That's just not the way it works. But the taxes, that's solely in control of government, and we, the people, to be able to decide how that's going. So I'm excited about the prospect of providing relief. We've done a lot of tax relief in Florida. Billions of dollars worth of relief over the last 6 years. It's meaningful. We're going to do more. I think the legislature's of the mindset we've reduced the business rent tax. We're the only state in the country that does it. Let's just eliminate it. I think they probably are receptive to that. And so that's all great. But this property tax is hitting people, and it's tough.
Is this in here for constitutional carry?
What's that?
Constitutional carry? Do you think it gets through this year?
So I am support. So it's kind of some of semantics. So the constitutional carry was what they called was signed by me in 2023, which was permitless concealed carry, which is actually the more important of the two. There's more states that allow open carry than allow concealed carry because it's just viewed if you know somebody has a firearm, they're quote less of a threat or a menace. If it's concealed, then you don't know. So it's always been people are more careful on concealed, or legislatures have been, than on open. So it's kind of an anomaly that we have permitless concealed, which I support, but do not allow open. And we're one of, I think, 4 states, California, Illinois, New York, and Florida, that doesn't do it. And I hear the arguments against it, but we know that's not true because we see other states that have laws that respect that. So I'm for it. I've always been for it. And here's what I know. If you talk to most gun owners, very few gun owners will actually open carry. They just want to know that they can. It's a constitutional right. And they want to know they can exercise their constitutional rights. So I'm for open carry. I'm also, and I called in the speech to reevaluate some of the recent legislation, which predated me as governor, but things like, if you look at this red flag law that was passed, you can go in, they can go in and say, this person's a danger, they should have their firearms taken away, which is property. in addition to being something connected with a constitutional right. And then the burden shifts where you have to prove to a court that you are not a menace or a threat. That's not the way due process works. The burden's always on the government, yet they've shifted the burden for doing that. The reality is this is not something that's been adjudicated all the way up to a court of last resort, but I think it's a huge, and I posed it at the time because I think it's a huge due process violation. And then you also have the issue of they've taken away the rights of young adults to purchase a long gun. So you can have somebody that's a Marine, they can get dumped in someplace in the Middle East carrying a rifle around, defending the country, and then they come home and they can't even buy a rifle to go hunt. That just doesn't make sense. I mean, are you an adult or not? And I think that was something that was problematic. So those are things that a lot of us have been talking about for a long time. I don't know what the legislature is going to do in those respects, but I can tell you that we, in spite of us saying we're the free state, in spite of us being like, oh, we're this Republican bastion, conservative bastion, we've definitely lagged on that issue compared. Now, we've done some good things since I've been governor here or there, and I'm happy to sign some of that legislation, but nothing really transformational.
What's the one thing the legislature should do to fix the Surfside law so that people aren't foreclosed on?
So what I would say is look why they're getting hit with assessments. I think we all agree if you need an assessment to be able to prevent a building from collapsing, nobody wants to relive Surfside. But I don't think you can look at how this law has actually operated and say that those assessments are all as a result of saving the building from collapsing. And so I think some flexibility, an ability for them to address these things, and then maybe even some things that they can choose to address or not. I mean, my view is there's certain things that probably need to be improved, but if it's not a major safety issue, then I think let's let them do it, have more transparency in the HOAs, and maybe allow local governments to police how they want to do it. But what I don't want to see is, we've got senior citizens on fixed income. Everything's gotten more expensive. Some of them have owned this condo free and clear, and then they're having to cough up tens of thousands of dollars. Now, wealthy people can do that, but middle class and working class cannot do that. So let's focus on what we need to do to get those folks, keep them in their condos. Now, I also have said, just on so many other things, we're either getting the job done or we're not. If they have a way to do it, and we had just ideas that we gave from condo owners, from people in the industry. We were in Tampa Bay, we were in Miami-Dade, we're in these areas where there's a lot of condos, and we solicited that. Maybe there's other ideas to do, and that's fine, but I don't think anyone really wants to leave here in May without having done anything to try to do this. And I said at the time, I mean, I was criticized because I wasn't diving into the Surfside reforms, and the reason I didn't was because I didn't know what needed to be done or not done. We hadn't even gotten really much of an indication by that point as to why Surfside happened. I know people had theories. The federal government has taken forever on that. So I'm like, all right, you guys do what you want. I trust you're talking to your constituents, so I'll sign it. And we did. But you just knew that there would potentially be a need to address some of this stuff. So let's get it done.
Governor, as far as DEI, a couple years back, to use your terms, you've kneecapped DEI here in the state for their practices. BlackRock. What do you make now that BlackRock has pretty much divested themselves away from DEI?
ESG. So, and DEI, but the ESG, environment, social governance, was basically this kind of ideological fervor that gripped some of these major financial institutions, where they were not just going to try to make money for their shareholders, they were going to save the world, and they were going to impose an ideological agenda through major financial power. And this was very trendy. In fact, I remember going over to, I think I was over in the UK, and I was in Japan. We did a trade mission years ago. And I was railing on ESG, and these guys like their throats, like they just, oh my gosh, I've never heard anyone say anything negative against ESG, because that was just part of what they thought needed to be done. We pushed back in Florida. Yes, we took money away from BlackRock when they were managing that in our pension because of those practices. We banned ESG for use as a consideration in the pensions, and DEI is included in that, but ESG is much broader. You're now seeing that ESG is all but dead. And we really led the charge against it. I remember the CEO of BlackRock was at one point, people like DeSantis have made it toxic or whatever. But it wasn't because we were just showboating on it. We took strong action because they were veering from their role to be good fiduciary stewards of the shareholders' value. That they had the fiduciary obligation to do that. This perverted that fiduciary obligation. And what they would say is, oh, well, we need to save the world, so that's good for the company, so then we can do all this other stuff. No, that's not right. So Florida led on it. We're glad that we've led on it. And not only BlackRock, you even have Disney getting rid of some of the DEI stuff. Disney looking at some of the programming that I know a lot of the parents were concerned about. So the tide, it seems like it's really shifted. When we were fighting these fights, years ago, we were really going into the teeth of this, and I think we were really instrumental in helping tee this up to go in a different direction.
You grew up in a community that started fluoridating the water when I believe you were 12, or 14, it was 1992. You ended up going to Yale and then Harvard. With health concerns about fluoride and lowering IQs and whatnot, what do you have concerns?
So you're the first journalist that's admitted that I may be smart. Usually you guys don't admit that. It's funny. So that's an assumption, I guess, that you're maybe just for the sake of the question. So here's the thing. First of all, I don't even remember any of that. I didn't even know there was fluoride in the water. I mean, obviously I would brush my teeth. I probably, as a young kid, was drinking more Gatorade and stuff, playing sports. I probably should have been housing more water, drink a lot of water now. But if you look at the data, and Joe Latipo's done a good job of doing this, the perverted benefit is like your teeth, right? But people can get fluoride by brushing their teeth and taking care of it. There is questions about, and I think it's younger people than maybe 12, that how does that impact? And I just think the general thing is, do we want forced medication or do we want people to be able to choose medication? So when you're forcing it into the water supply, that's not really giving people the choice. If people want to be able to purchase fluoridated water or do more, then they already have an ability to do it. But I do think you're going to see HHS lean in the direction of Latipo under Bobby Kennedy. And I think that's, to me, the way to go. Let people make decisions. No forced medication.
Speaker Perez mentioned that the insurance report was never given to legislators. Why wasn't it?
Did they? You mean from OIR? Yeah. Did they ask OIR? I don't know. I mean, that was before.
I never knew that anything was ever produced.
Right. Well, what I do know is this: they, the legislature, and huge reforms that they've done over many years. I mean, they've done special sessions. They did 2023 consumer protections. They've done a lot in recent years. Having oversight over those particular entities is something that is now in Florida law. It was not in Florida law at the time, that this alleged happened. But what I'd say is, if there's any type of more oversight from a regulator that would make sense. Now, we don't want to drive people out like California has. They've lost all these companies. Other states have lost a lot of companies. And you got to have a favorable environment. And that's not even true that's not only true for this sector, it's true for really any sector. So if there's things that need to be done, then I'm willing to work. What I'm not going to support is opening the floodgates for incentivizing more litigation. That will destabilize things. I think a lot of companies will leave. We have the most challenging property insurance market in the United States by far, maybe one of the most challenging in the world. Actually, some of these guys who do like reinsurance overseas tell me Florida's the most difficult any place in the world. Now, we had actually a decrease in reinsurance in 2024. Inflation didn't go down. There was a decrease, and a lot of it was because of the litigation reforms, the stability that you had, a little bit more certainty. Because I think when we had Irma and we had Michael, initially people said, oh, we think the market is going to be fine. And then what happened, I think, was, 2-3 years down the road, you still had new claims filed, lawsuits filed, and the costs escalated, and then some of these companies went under. We've now had it to where it's more transparent. There's not an incentivization to litigate to where you get the attorney's fees if you win, but if you lose and file a bad case, the other side doesn't get it. If we want to go to loser pays, I would do that across the board, but it would need to be both sides would pay if they lose.
Auto insurance. You mentioned auto insurance rates during your speech that they've gone down.
There is a bill has popped up over in the House about revisiting PIP insurance and overhauling that again. You vetoed a previous effort. I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
So I don't know what it's going to look like. That bill that I did, I looked at. There was analysis done, and I think it was the Pinnacle study that I think convincingly said you were going to see a spike in rates. And so did we want to see a spike in rates because of a reform? And I think when you're doing that, you're mandating the people to have additional coverages, which, you could argue as a policy matter, but I don't see how you can say it's going to be cheaper to have more robust coverage mandated on people. And so that's the concern to me. I don't want to do things that are going to raise rates. If they have a reform where we can show that it's going to lower rates, it's fine. But let's just be clear. I mean, we know that's something that people from the legal and the trial bar have wanted to do. And so why would they want to do that? Well, obviously, they see that there's opportunities for them to make money off of it. I mean, that's just, I think, goes without saying. So I don't want to do anything that's going to raise the rates. The only reason the rates went down, because, I've asked some of these guys, we were at the Army-Navy game, and I was talking to some of the guys at USAA. And, look, we've been USAA members for a long time. And I think it's great. And First Lady lost a car years ago in a storm. We literally put in the claim. Some guy shows up 48 hours later and just cuts us a check. And I'd never seen anything like it. And I always remind them, I was like, I'll be a customer for life because you guys didn't play games. You did it, and you did. So, I have confidence in USA just as a veteran and having done that. And so I'm talking to these guys. I'm like, why is auto insurance going up so much more than even other things in inflation? Because if you look at 2024 inflation print year over year, I think auto insurance nationwide went up like 20 to 22%, more than food, more than all these other things. And basically they said, well, cars are more like computers now. Used to be you'd have a car, you know how to fix a bumper. Now there's sensors, there's all these things. And so when there's accidents, the cost of fixing that just gets higher. And so it drives rates up. Then you have overall inflation, you have other things. So that has been happening everywhere. And then in Florida, we have challenges with how the culture of driving is. I mean, I was telling people when we had the snowstorm. Now, North Florida may be a little bit better than South Florida for driving, but I was afraid everyone's going to be peeling out on this ice and stuff, and we were plowing it, and I think it ended up working out okay. But you have that situation, and so the only reason Geico has announced a 10.5% average reduction, the only reason State Farm has announced a 6% on average. The only reason Progressive has announced 8% reduction, the only reason is the litigation reform and the legal reform. And we were an anomaly amongst most states. Now we have something that's just more stable. So that's just something that's really, really important. And I wish, look, if there was legislation we could sign, I can charge you, $10 a month for auto insurance or whatever. And if that could work, I would do it. But we know that's not how these markets work. So you have to have predictability. You have to have a good environment. And the fact that we had, just think of where we are now. 3 storms, and I'm not seeing any indication that there's some type of collapse imminent in the markets. I think people would have predicted that 3 or 4 years ago, and yet you kind of say, okay, we're going to do business, we're going to keep doing that. So the only reason that is because there's more stability, there's more predictability. So let's not do things that are going to cause problems. I understand there's different interest groups, but that's just the nature of it. So thanks everybody for coming today. I want to thank the legislature for their hard work thus far with the immigration. We got there. It wasn't necessarily a straight shot, but we got there, and we're leading the country on that. So let's continue to lead on all these other issues. Thank you.